So a skeletal muscle is actually an organ. So all of your individual skeletal muscles are organs. So what that means is that an organ is composed of more than one type of tissue. So we can talk about the skeletal muscle tissue, and we can talk about the individual cells that make up that tissue. And the individual cells are called muscle fibers. So a muscle cell is a muscle fiber. Same thing, muscle fiber. And so these muscle fibers are bound to one another into bundles, and this is called a muscle fascicle. So we can talk about fascicles are bundles of muscle fibers. Now, what is bundling that muscle fiber is actually connective tissue, and that connective tissue is sometimes called fascia. So muscle fascia is the connective tissue that surrounds these individual fascicles, but also the individual muscle. So we could talk about muscle. There's other places where fascia is, but fascia is the connective tissue. Surrounding the fascicles and the outside of the muscle. So these obviously have terms, but we are not going to memorize those this quarter. So let's look at the muscle fibers. So this is an individual muscle fiber right here. So this whole thing is a muscle fiber, and actually inside of the fibers, we're going to talk more about this, are organelles called myofibrils. So this is an individual muscle fiber right here, and then this muscle fiber is bound by connective tissue into a bundle called a fascicle. So these would be the fascicles. So these individual muscle fibers are right here, and they're bound together in the fascicles. And then it's like these different hierarchies of order. So then from the muscle fascicles, we have an individual skeletal muscle that is a bundle of fascicles. So you'll notice here that there are blood vessels. Those have their own tissues in them. Blood vessels are also organs. And we also have the connection of the skeletal muscle to the bone. So I want to talk about that connection a little bit. So the skeletal muscle to the bone is, that connection is called, actually, let's just draw it on here. That is called a tendon. So a tendon, this is connective tissue. It's actually dense, regular connective tissue, but you don't need to know that. So connective tissue that attaches the muscle to the bone. And this is hard to read, so I will go to another page. Okay, so a tendon is connective tissue that attaches muscle to bone. And you're like, how can you attach something to bone? But remember, there's actually connective tissue on the outside of the bone. And so that is actually shown in this diagram where we have this bone that is covered by the periosteum. So it's actually connective tissue adhering to connective tissue. Okay, and it tends to be white in color. And why is it white in color? Because it has lots of collagen fibers. Remember, we talked about that as an important structural protein would be the collagen fibers. So again, you don't need to know the perimysium or the epimysium or the endomysium. Those are terms that you are not going to be required to know this quarter. So what is the difference between a tendon and a ligament? Let's just talk about that for a second. So a ligament is not associated with muscles, but is connecting bone to bone. So it connects bone to bone. So it would help to stabilize joints. And where did we see that previously? We saw it in the shoulder joint, but we also saw it in the knee joint. Remember, we had collateral ligaments on the inside of the knee and on the outside of the knee. And then we had these cruciate ligaments that crossed over in between. And those ligaments are very strong. They're also white. They don't have blood vessels in them. So they're very, very difficult to repair. And so oftentimes when there is damage to them, you have to have surgery in order to repair them, to get them back to the strength and the stability that you once had within your joint. Okay,